what the media is not telling you about the aftermath of Hurricane Laura and why. That's coming up on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. It's so frustrating to watch the way that the media is so completely in the tank politically, so that what they choose to report and what they choose not to report is all driven specifically by Orange Man Bad trying to get Trump out of office. It's just unbelievable. To the point where you have politicians and media working together to try to make riots look like protests, to try to make killings, justified violence look like brutality, and to make the aftermath of a hurricane cleanup more difficult for the people involved so that it will bring on a sense of misery and malaise so that hopefully they will vote differently in November. And that's really what we're seeing. I'm going to try to keep this podcast short today because I want you to really ruminate on this message. And I'm not just going to tell you what's wrong. I'm going to tell you what we can do to make it right. Now, when it comes to the aftermath of Hurricane Laura, I just got back from reporting on that hurricane, as you've seen in my previous podcasts. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the governor of the state, John Bel Edwards, even the mayors of some of the cities involved, on the Democratic side, the governor is a Democrat, are almost intentionally, I mean, I don't know how else to interpret what they're doing other than to say that they are intentionally trying to make it harder for people to come back from the hurricane, intentionally trying to make things worse and more miserable, specifically so that people will somehow attach that misery, that feeling of misery, to Donald Trump and vote him out of office in November. And the reason I say this is simply this. The governor of the state, and we've seen this from a lot of Democratic governors around the country, they're working very hard to make the COVID crisis a much bigger deal than it needs to be. The fact that now the reports out are saying that literally only 9,000 people have died worldwide specifically from the COVID virus and had no other comorbidities, meaning the vast majority of the people who have died from the COVID virus had other problems to begin with, and the COVID virus happened to be there when they died, but was not the sole reason why they died, okay? So if that's the case, then this virus is much less dangerous than everybody has said, but you have to see that these politicians and the media believe that there's a very vested interest on their part in making it seem worse than it really is. And that's because they want this to be attached to the Trump administration. And so we're seeing this in the cleanup after Hurricane Laura. In Louisiana, John Bel Edwards closed all of the local emergency shelters. So normally, when you're a poor person and there's a hurricane like this, part of your survival plan is to go and sleep at the local high school or the local National Guard armory or something like that, local churches, and get food and water there, maybe get a shower there, have some help. And then during the day, you go back to your job or you go back and try to clean up the mess that your house has become, clean up your yard and that sort of thing. Well, John Bel Edwards decided that because of the COVID crisis, he was going to close all of the local shelters and tell people, well, you're going to have to go to hotels in Baton Rouge and New Orleans and places like that, which are hours away from the affected areas. Now, first of all, if you can't afford, I think they had a grand total of like 600 hotel rooms in Baton Rouge that were free for people who needed them, and the need was much larger than that. So essentially, he was telling people, you're going to have to go, you're on your own. And for most people, they had to get themselves there. So if you didn't have a car, What the upshot of all that is that many people ended up staying in their homes and riding out the storm because they didn't have the resources necessary to go ride it out in a high school or a more hardened shelter. And that could have very well have resulted in many more deaths than it did. We're fortunate that the biggest problem from this storm was wind and not storm surge, because if we had had the storm surge they were calling for, many more people would have died. There's just no two ways about that. So now that it's over, there's no water, there's no power in Lake Charles, and they're trying to get back to, people are trying to get back to their homes and clean up the mess and rebuild their lives. But they can't, because there's no shelters open and they can't stay in their homes. So they are stuck. They're stuck at a hotel. Not only that, but the first responders and non-governmental organizations and even FEMA who come in to those areas after a crisis like this are not able to find hotel rooms, because all the hotel rooms are picked up by refugees. I myself was not able to find a hotel room my last night there, and I had to stay with a friend in Lafayette. And so this is a major problem. And Clay Higgins, the congressman from the 3rd District of Louisiana, has been begging the governor to do something about it. And I just want to read for you the letter that Higgins wrote to the governor right now, because it says a lot about where they are politically on the two sides. Listen to this. It says, I write today to urge you to open local shelters across southwest Louisiana in the wake of Hurricane Laura. The damage caused by this storm has caused an immeasurable and immediate need for local community shelters in regions hardest hit by the storm. While I appreciate you've authorized the Red Cross to establish congregate shelters, the need for emergency shelter greatly exceeds the capabilities of the Red Cross alone. Southwest Louisiana's community and faith-based organizations must be allowed to operate shelters to meet the demands of the crisis. My office has been hearing from many people who have not slept or eaten. These people have who have only the clothing on their backs. Most obviously have no internet, no electricity, dead cell phones, no water, no sewerage service, heavy damage to their home, medical conditions, no reliable car, no money for fuel. They're overheated, frightened, living a nightmare. COVID-19 is absolutely not their paramount concern, and they cannot wait to be bused to shelters in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or Shreveport. Further, community shelters provide critical care items, distribution points, water, MREs, ice. They provide destination point for volunteers traveling from across the state with truckloads of relief supplies and volunteer services and equipment. Community-based shelters are a critical dynamic of storm recovery. The Red Cross is the Red Cross. It's a huge bureaucracy in and of itself. We're glad to have them serving, but communities need clearance to activate their own volunteer services and community shelters. What does it say about a governor who would literally prohibit churches and parallel structures of government from operating to help the people of his own state? Think about that. Think about that. What that shows is that he hates Donald Trump more than he loves the people of his own state. And that is a travesty. Now, I want to just show you a video that I filmed back 3 years ago during Hurricane Harvey. And it's of my friend Kenny Vaughn. And Kenny Vaughn put very precisely, very succinctly, why we need to allow people to help each other, because that is where our power lies as a nation. And this message that he delivers is the perfect message for our country right now. Check it out.
Hey, listen, I love my country. I've always loved my country, but I didn't know my country. And I get out and I go everywhere I can. But I met my country this weekend, the last 3 days. I met them in every color, every shape, and every race. They are so grateful. They are so courageous. They're amazing. And I want our country to come together. Our country was built on love. And love isn't a feeling. It is doing what is best for someone else without regard for yourself. It's the best thing you'll ever do for yourself, but you can't do it for yourself. We've all been hurt. Some of us been hurt far worse than others. Most have been hurt worse than me. but nothing will fix hurt like loving other people. Being loved is nice, but when you get busy loving, when you get busy putting other people before yourself, that's what built this nation. That's why this nation's great. The only thing that can tear it down is selfishness and fear. We saw that this weekend, and we have a loving nation. It is still here, and I want us to start loving each other.
Okay, folks, that's all I've got for the Hot Zone today. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here, and we've got a whole lot more coming this week. Take care.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.